Good evening. This is the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting, Tuesday, July 26, 2011. Al, could we have a roll call?
Mary Jane Brady.
Present.
Terry Carney.
Present.
Al Fifehouse. Present. Eric Wagoner.
Present.
Leanne Charlot.
Present.
Mark Berry. Susan Ryder.
Present. Thank you. First item on our agenda is communications. Do we have any communications or questions from visitors? Okay. Just, if you'll give me 1 second here. The Board of Education encourages and welcomes public comments and questions in this section of our meeting. If you're going to address the board, we ask that you begin by stating your name and address. Please limit your comments and questions to 5 minutes. One of the board members will serve as a timer. The board will not immediately respond or react to your comments. We do appreciate the time that you took to prepare your comments and coming to this meeting. We will commit to listening to what you have to say. We do need time to process your comments and follow up as indicated. Please do not make any negative comments about a staff member of District 65. If you do have a comment to make about a staff member, please contact a member of the board or administration about addressing that in a private meeting. Again, thank you for your time and adherence to our policy.
My name is Bob Clifford, 320 Circle Drive, and I'm here tonight representing a group of over 73 citizens in the neighborhood surrounding the middle school and East School sites, whose lives are being negatively impacted every day and night by the noise pollution being emitted from the HVAC compressors at the middle school. We are enduring the 3rd summer of this nuisance that is interrupting our otherwise tranquil and peaceful neighborhood. I stand before you tonight to let you know that our patience is wearing thin. Our goal is to work with the school district to return the noise levels in the neighborhood to what they were before the HVAC compressors were installed. In other words, full noise abatement. Thus far, your attempts to mitigate the noise levels have resulted in poor results that are completely unsatisfactory to the neighborhood. 3 months ago, we were told to wait for the demolition of East School, and we were told it would help the situation. We believe the opposite has happened. The removal of East School has actually now broadened the impact to residents along East Sheridan Road and Vincent Court, and has increased the noise levels for residents of Circle Drive and Witchwood Avenue. On Wednesday last week, many of you were in attendance of the simulation of what the sound would be with baffles on top of the compressor unit. None of us in attendance that day felt the baffles would solve the problem. As a group, we are strongly recommending that you do not waste additional taxpayer resources on baffles. It would result in another Band-Aid on the situation, and we would still be subjected to the loud compressor noise. The contractors the school district has employed thus far have not offered real solutions to this public nuisance. We strongly urge you to look at companies that specialize and have expertise in the field of industrial noise control. We have provided the superintendent, Ben Martindale, with some alternative solution providers for industrial noise control, and will continue to provide them alternative sources for the school district to explore. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 3rd summer of having to deal with this interruption of our otherwise tranquil and peaceful neighborhood. I can't imagine anyone here tonight would want to endure even a single night listening to the constant grinding of an industrial-sized compressor. The neighborhood surrounding the school has lived with this now for 3 years. We have been respectful of the school board's requests to be patient. However, now that the East School demolition is complete, we are asking the board for prompt action to bring this matter to a successful outcome. As a result, we have formed a committee of impacted residents. This committee, known as the Middle School Noise Abatement Committee, is comprised of concerned and affected citizens, and I will serve as the official spokesperson for this committee. The MSNA is specifically requesting the following. 1, a plan professionally prepared by a firm with expertise to research and recommend potential full noise abatement once a solution is chosen. And 4, a specific timeline for fixing this issue with a series of scheduled updates from Superintendent Martindale on the progress towards the goal of returning the noise levels in the neighborhood to what they were prior to HVAC compressors. Ideally, we would like this issue to be solved this fall. Thank you.
I'm Kristen Clifford. I'm at 320 Circle Drive as well. Since the loud and high-pitched HVAC compressors have been installed at the middle school 3 years ago, our family's way of life has changed. We do anything we can to avoid the nuisance that is directly beside our house. We don't leave our windows open for the fresh air to enter. We don't play outside for long periods of time. We don't invite friends or family to our home when the compressors are running. Why would I want to affect anyone else with this noise pollution? The compressors have been running for most of the summer from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. During this period, my family and I spend most of the time either indoors or away from our house. Our life before the compressors was quiet and peaceful. That is why we bought our home. To live on a street where we could play outside and enjoy the outdoors. Living in our home is not enjoyable when the compressors are running. Think to yourselves, would you want you or your family to live like this? Research has shown that long-term effects of exposure to noise pollution include high levels of stress, hypertension, sleep disturbances, depression, hearing loss, etc. I have personally been affected by noise pollution in a negative way. This not only affects my family, but over 70 people that surround the middle school. Our community can't go on like this. We want our neighborhood back to the quiet and peaceful way it was before the HVAC compressors.
Evening. I'm Jeff Scott, and this is my wife Sharon. We live at 39 Circle Drive. I'm here tonight to make a few comments regarding the HVAC.
Michael.
As an aside from my primary remarks, I want to mention that, in my opinion, the demolition of East School did not reduce the noise pollution from the HVAC unit. The building must have been deflecting or absorbing sound because the noise is actually louder than it was prior to the demolition. In effect, it's worse for those that were already being impacted, and now the noise impacts residents in the surrounding neighborhood as well that were not previously impacted. But with that as an aside, I'll get to my primary remarks. The situation that we find ourselves in has resulted, I think, from a lack of conscientious planning at the time the middle school improvements were made and the unit was actually installed. And then since then, I would say, I'd add to that, a series of short-sighted solutions that were not really supported by expert opinion and research. Surely a well-researched plan would have considered the noise pollution and safety implications of an industrial-sized HVAC unit installed near a residential neighborhood and on school grounds. However, it's clear that from the start that the placement of the chiller was actually an afterthought. It was not in the original plans, and it did not even include a protective wall once installed. Once the protective wall was built, it covered a part of the windows on the east side of the building. You've probably all seen that. That obviously results in an aesthetically unappealing look, and I might add, without any noise pollution reduction. So, the results at this point have been disappointing. So, in my opinion, I think outcomes like these are signs of visible dysfunction in the planning process. Now, At this point, I hear the board is considering placing baffles on the top of the protective wall to reduce the noise pollution from the HVAC unit. Apparently, this decision would be based upon the baffle sound test that was conducted last Wednesday by a firm and individual who I understand lacks specific expertise in the area of industrial noise control. And I have here in front of me the screenshot of the website of Threshold Acoustics. The company was established to provide room acoustics and audio-visual design consulting services. And it goes on to say, beyond their core practice in cultural and religious buildings, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, regardless of that, and in any event, the simulation did not even simulate the actual noise of the HVA compressors, as I'm told, as I was not present. It's also come to my attention that the school board would like to run the unit on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis when necessary, and as of late, we've noticed that it's running at night. Did this sound engineer take noise readings at different times of the day or in the middle of the night, for instance? This looks to me like a pattern is forming, or should I say being continued. When the school board recommended that residents support the referendum to build a new elementary school and make improvements at the middle school, it was well understood as a community that there would be shared benefits and sacrifice. But now the residents surrounding the middle school are being asked to shoulder 100% of the negative impacts of the middle school improvements. I urge the board to consider a comprehensive long-term solution, to hire a professional with specific expertise in the area of industrial noise control to research the potential solutions for full noise abatement and to make recommendations with full cost estimates and timelines. I thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Richard Fontana. I live at 321 Circle Drive, the last house on the end of Circle Drive. I am directly affected by the compressor noise. I've lived in this house for 22 years. I've lived next to East School for 22 years. Even with the noise associated with East School, like the snowplow operators in the middle of the night or the garbage trucks coming in the middle of the night, I've never been affected by anything like this type of noise that comes with the HVAC compressors. We have heard excuse after excuse for a solution to this problem, and we've been patient. Since the East School has come down, the noise at my front door has gotten worse. We have altered our lives around this compressor noise. My children cannot sleep with the windows open. We have been patient thus far and would like a timeline on a fix for this problem. Thank you.
My name is Christine Claywitter. My husband, Michael Claywitter. We've lived for 26 years at 130 East Sheridan Place, which is directly across what used to be the East School. Well over a year and a half ago, I noticed the sound of the compressor units and called the East School to complain about the fact that we could hear them at night, and we were told at that time that the school was looking into it. So you can see how long this has been going on from our perspective. You know, after the East School went down, we've noticed that the sound has increased. I've taken a walk along Vincent Court, and you can hear it just come across the field. It's clear as day, it's widespread, and we are in full support of something permanently being done to abate this sound, which is a total nuisance. And I'm so thankful that everybody has come together here tonight to present this information because it's very important. Thank you.
My name is Don Fawcett. I live at 28 East Witchwood Lane. And I think friends here have done a thorough job of presenting the problem. I don't have that much to add to it other than I'm a pretty far distance away from the source of the noise. We can hear it at our house. It is a nuisance for us as well. And we really need a excuse me, long-term solution to the problem, not a temporary one or a quick one to try and move beyond it, but something that really takes care of the problem. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you all.
I have one question for Mr. Clifford. You had four things that your organization wanted, and I didn't catch the fourth one. I'm sorry.
I passed out my extra copies of this. I'd be happy to pass it on.
I'm glad to have one. Thank you.
Anybody else?
The name is included here as well?
My name?
The name of the organization?
Yes.
Okay.
Middle school noise abatement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the presentation by Jane. Going to take a couple minutes. What Jane is going to do is summarize the 2010-11 financial picture of the district, taking a look at budget versus actual, unaudited, but to show the board by fund and by major categories where the figures came in. And she and I did discuss briefly this, and it's a pretty good picture, all things considered. And so she's going to summarize this and then open it up for questions from the board. And Jane, I don't have much more to say, so. About this item. I mean, I've got other things to say, but.
Well, the board has a copy of. It is following you around. You have a copy of the summary of each fund in your board packet, as well as a year-to-date actual budget for each fund. What I'm going to present here are just the one-page summary of all fund and the graphs, just for our audience and just briefly comment on each.
Jane, you want to use the microphone? Aim it somewhere else.
Yes, sir. That's pretty.
I do want to stress that these are unaudited figures. when the auditors, actually the auditors arrive next week, when they submit the annual financial report in October, the numbers will change somewhat, but they shouldn't be material. What I've given you here is a breakdown by fund. I don't know if you all can see this very well or not. Okay. What I'm illustrating you here, these are actuals for the year. The revenues are really done on a modified accrual basis. So for example, the local revenues reflect the tax dollars that we received for fiscal year 11. So some of those dollars were actually received in 09-10, some were received this year. Those adjustments have been made in this report. The state revenues reflect only those revenues we received for fiscal year 11 in fiscal year 11. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The expenses are really done on a cash basis. So those are checks written from July 1, 2010 through June 30th, 2011. The auditors will make some adjustments, but I said nothing material when they come. Overall, not the bottom line, but the next to bottom line is a surplus deficit, shows that for our operating funds, we operated in a surplus. The only fund that operated in a deficit was the IMRF fund, which is the pension for non-certified staff, as well as the employer's portion of Social Security and Medicare. We knew that budget or that fund would run deficit. We've known that from projections years past. We prepared for that by building up a very healthy fund balance. We will continue to operate in a deficit in this fund for the next few years. That's what tax caps do, essentially, because that will start eroding the rate. So that's the purpose of building up your fund balances. So when you hit those times, you're prepared. It's nothing to worry about at this time, but it's something we'll look at long term. Any questions on this before I move? Yes?
The capital projects?
Capital projects is basically your construction fund. So we essentially have, the only revenue we have is a little bit of interest earnings in that. So I budget for everything that's available in that fund, but we didn't really spend it. It's the same thing for next year. Until those dollars are spent. You have a question?
I see. And so the 900,000
900,000
moved from O&M over to capital projects?
Correct.
Is that what I'm saying?
The 900,000 was the proceeds we received when we sold West School several years
Okay.
ago. So those funds are transferred into the capital project funds to be spent towards capital projects, which is now the demo of East School,
I see.
the work we're doing at middle school.
So the expenses that we see on capital projects of 239, I think.
Yes.
And 252, just what were those this last year?
Some of those are A&E fees. Some of them are some work, capital project work that we did. The bulk of the costs for demo and all that will be in the fiscal year 12
In 12,
budget.
okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Going back to state funding, in this fiscal year, we just ended June 30th, we actually received $756,000 in the education fund and $191,000 in transportation. However, of those dollars we received this year, those were for $309,000 in the education fund. That's what the state owed us for the previous year, that we should have received by June 30th of 2010. But we really didn't receive those until this year, and most of them we received in December, so 6 months late. For the current fiscal year, and this is what was reflected in the previous sheet, we received $446,000 in the education fund. Those monies we were supposed to receive this year for this year, but the state still owes us over $200,000 in the education fund and $81,000 in the transportation fund.
And in that sentence, when you say this year, you mean
I'm
10,
sorry.
11?
Yes.
Okay.
For the year ending June 30th,
Okay.
2000, I'm sorry. What the state did was the bulk of the funds we received for this year are general state aid, which we don't receive very much. It's about $230,000. They've made good on all general state aid to all school districts. They paid 100%. Everything else, they paid about 50%. So we are fortunate that we're not dependent upon state funding, because those school districts who are, the state has really put them in some serious financial bind. This, I want to illustrate the bulk of our revenues are local revenues, the bulk of which are, of course, are property taxes. Our expenses, I've broken these down by what we refer to as objects. So you see the percentage for salaries and benefits. We're a service industry, so the bulk of our expenses are going to be in salaries and benefits. Services include any purchase service. Those are fees, those are repair and maintenance costs, lease payments, any service that we purchase for a variety of reasons. Supplies are consumables, basically, but that also includes our energy costs. That includes electricity and natural gas. Capital outlay, again, that's capital project costs or equipment costs. Tuition is primarily special education tuition for children who are placed outside of the district. So for NSSCD, or we have some in private placement. There's just a little tiny bit in there that is what we pay to Lake Forest High School District for some children in accelerated classes. Other dues and fees, that sort of thing. And then lease and debt payments. Debt being our bond and interest payments on our construction bonds. This is the same information, our expenses, but broken down differently. So now we're looking at kind of areas of where the funds are spent. So the bulk are instruction and instructional support. And instructional support includes those areas that are really in the schools and providing services to children. Psychologists, social workers, speech pathologists, library media center, those people, and I included the principal's offices in here as well. So they're really direct support of instruction, but also provide services to children. Central administration and operations is basically your district office, personnel, administration, clerical people, also buildings and grounds. This includes transportation. So everything that's outside of, but in support of the people working in the schools. Tuition is the same as I described previously, and debt is also the same.
Jane,
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Do we have any sense of how those numbers or percentages compare to other school districts' percentages? And perhaps this is an unfair question, sort of out of the blue, but I'm interested to know.
My answer is that we compare very well. But you can get this information from the school report cards.
The information is to
And I will tell you, when the school report card looks at instruction, they do not include in instructional support.
I see.
They're going by what we refer to as the Illinois Program Accounting Manual. The state dictates how our account numbers work. So those people that are services I mentioned earlier, psychologists, social workers, speech path, all of those are considered support. And they would be categorized along with central administration, custodian, maintenance, bus drivers, everything else.
I see.
I've separated them because to me it really is a better picture of how money is spent providing direct services to children.
Right.
Okay? Not everybody will do this, but if we go strictly by the accounting, then those are going to be grouped with central administration operations.
Thank you.
Is that okay? This is the same exact information in just a little different picture. Just kind of gives you where our instruction expenses are the bulk, the basic foundation. Everything else in the school district is aimed at supporting instruction. My role is to support instruction. Custodian's role is to support instruction. So everything else is in support of what the teachers ultimately do. Questions?
Yes, of course you did. So back on that last slide.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So you gave yourself as an example and said that you're in support of instruction. Does that mean you're in the purple?
No, I'm in central administration.
That's what I
Yes,
thought.
I'm in central administration.
But the psychologists, et cetera, they are in that purple
Correct,
section.
correct.
Okay. That's
Absolutely.
what I thought. I
Correct.
just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
Thanks.
correct.
Why would you put tuition in there if it's for NSSD and things like that? That's part of, supporting
Because,
the child.
because those are costs that are broken out by
I know, but I'm just saying,
tuition.
if you think about the cost of instruction or providing
Well, there-
educational experience for students.
I agree,
where they
but
may go.
included in that tuition are also central office administration at those, like NSSED, we're paying central office administration in that. I mean, we could go through the billing and pull those out, but
I just think it's more there than just by itself.
you're correct. And part of those costs are providing instruction to students, absolutely.
Jane, for viewers and members of the audience, how would they easily get to the school report cards that are published annually for districts here?
Ours should be on the website, but you can go on the state board's website and get anybody's, any school district's report card. There's also an interactive.
Right.
Illinois Interactive Report Card. If they Google that, they'll get there.
But it's also on our website, I
Yeah,
believe.
ours should be on the website.
Ours is, but to compare us
You
to
can,
others.
you can get any school district's
Right.
report card from the state board website, or, Ann, you want to say that one more time?
Illinois Interactive Report Card.
There you go. Anything else?
Other questions?
Nope, thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you.
Okay, next is under reports. I don't believe we have a PTO report tonight that I can see.
Kate?
Okay. Next report is my report. And I don't have much because I've only been on the job a couple of weeks, but I do want to say to the board and to the audience that I'm really excited to be part of the Lake Bluff community as the interim superintendent. I really look forward to establishing a strong relationship with students, with staff, parents, community, and to work with the board in this year of transition. This district has a really great reputation. Trust me, I've been in Lake County for a long time. I've been in education for 41 years, and this district has a very strong reputation. I hope to be able to sustain that, but also move it forward in the areas that it needs to move forward in. And to dispel some confusion, I will be the interim superintendent for the entire year. You may have read on the website or somewhere that I'm limited in the terms of the number of days that I can actually be in the office, but I will be working all year for District 65 as the interim superintendent. And so you'll have me all year. I can be reached really at any time, whether I'm in the office or in the district or not, and so I'm very sensitive to getting back to people in a timely fashion, whether that's by phone, whether that's by email, or whether that's a face-to-face contact. So I encourage the board and anyone else to take advantage of that. I'm probably obsessed by being able to get back to people immediately. That being said, I do want to introduce Shelley Overman, who is the new principal at our grade school, and so she's here tonight. Many of you may have seen her, but she she kind of started today, so we really welcome her. And we're also going to be fortunate, I believe, in a couple of weeks to have our curriculum consultant be available to begin working with us, Joanne Trahanis. And so we're eager to initiate that position and begin to have her explore her needs assessment, as we talked about previously with the board. That being said, as I said, I just started, and some of my time the last couple of weeks have been with some of the issues that have already been identified, and also beginning to set up planning for the upcoming year in terms of meetings and things like that. So that being said, that would conclude all I have this time. Certainly next time I'll more than likely have more.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, the next report is from the board president.
I also don't have very much to report. I did want to say welcome to Dr. Ben Martindale. We're very pleased that he was available to be our interim superintendent for this year, and we too are looking forward to him not only working on some of the projects that we have ongoing, but on some new initiatives that we'd like to take advantage of his skills and his experience in education. And we'd also like to welcome Mrs. Shelley Overman. So welcome to Lake Bluff, both of you. Thank you. And I don't think I had a report, correct? Did Ann have a report?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, we skipped. I'm sorry, Ann. You and I talked, and I said I would recognize you to give a short report, and then I blew right by you, so
It's okay. It's okay.
go ahead.
We're excited that staff has been busy working this summer on a variety of interesting curriculum projects related to 21st century learning. And they've been working in pairs or larger teams, grade level teams or cross-grade level teams, to find ways to incorporate 21st century learning skills into existing and or new curriculum. And the projects have been pretty interesting and exciting. So we're happy to have those results in and look forward to seeing them in the fall. We finished Kaleidoscope Summer School the middle of July. We had about 40 classes were attended by students, and everybody seemed pretty happy the days that I was visiting, so it was kind of exciting. It also incorporated our extended school year services for students with special needs or tiered services. And I met quite a few times this summer with both professional development people from NSSED and CEDAL to kind of assess the needs, talk about the greater needs of the district to provide appropriate training cooperatively among the districts within NSSED and or CEDAL to plan to save money by sharing staff development and really work toward what we need based on actual talk with directors from districts. So we're well on our way there. It's exciting.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay, next we move down to the discussion section. The first item under discussion is the middle school chiller issue. And so in your packet, or on your screen, you do have a short memo from me which kind of summarizes some of the thoughts and observations that I've gathered over the last, or I shouldn't say the last, but the first 2 weeks that I've been here relative to this issue. Just to summarize a little bit for those board members that weren't in attendance, there was a special board meeting last week where we did have an attempt to simulate the sound of the compressors, both two compressors and one compressor, and there was, I don't know what term to use, disappointment, confusion, whatever, but I think one of the things that came out of that was that there's a possibility that a baffling mechanism might work in terms of sound reduction. But one of the concerns I have is that the board has done some things that have not resulted in the degree of noise reduction that is acceptable without being overly disruptive to the neighborhood. And so last Saturday I had the opportunity to meet with some of the, actually some of the folks that are here tonight to listen to their concerns. And one of the things suggested to me was the possibility of having the district or myself contact somebody who has a high degree of expertise, or at least seems to have a high degree of expertise in industrial noise abatement. And so even though the agenda tonight had on as potential action to look at getting cost information for baffling installation, I would like to, with the board's permission, not to take that action, or not to suggest the board taking that action tonight, but to allow me to contact this company to get another opinion and a point of discussion with them for them to see. They do. I have not contacted them. I was going to wait until I had this discussion with the board. I was eager to contact them, but I waited. And so that's the direction I would like to take, to see if somebody whose company at least purports to specialize in industrial noise abatement might have some ideas about how we might approach this. And their ideas may be that you install baffling equipment. Their ideas may be that you move it. I don't know what their ideas are going to be, but I would at least like to engage in a conversation with them and take it from there. So, questions from the board?
I'm interested to know what your thoughts are, and perhaps this is the first time you'd considered it as well, about having a group like the Middle School Noise Abatement Committee or someone similar that can partner with us to help assess that.
Well, that's always an opportunity out there, but I view situations like this as really the responsibility of the school district. Certainly the citizens that live next to this school are affected by this. There's no question about that. And that noise is evident really at all times of operation. And certainly it is more disruptive at some times over others, but it is always evident. But I think it's the responsibility of the administration and the Board of Education to try and come up with a workable solution. If the board wants to entertain working in partnership with a citizens group, they can always do that. But in my eyes, the real responsibility for correcting this is with the Board of Education and the administration. We certainly welcome ideas from anyone. And many times, more eyes than just mine or other administrators is helpful in coming up with a solution.
Any thoughts on reaching out to more than one expert?
Yes, yes. As I mentioned to the folks I met with on Saturday, I think at this point we really have to look beyond what maybe we've looked so far. But you also have to keep in mind, you have to be sensitive to the cost. You've spent a fair amount of money up to this point, and the results you've achieved, one could argue, have not balanced against the cost you've spent. But you do have to be sensitive to the cost. You may end up with recommended solutions that are $500,000, and so that could be disruptive. But at this point, I think it might be worth starting with this company and see where it may lead. I also have had experience with other engineers. I haven't reached out to any of them, but I'm thinking about doing that because I am sensitive to try and provide a sense of relief to the people that live next to this. Other questions?
To clarify, you said you had met with some of the folks from the neighborhood affected. Did you say that you thought, in their perception, the baffles might be a solution?
No.
Oh,
No,
not
no,
a solution?
No. I don't know whether the baffles are going to be helpful to abating the noise. One could say that based on some of the numbers that were provided by Threshold Acoustics, that you could draw the conclusion that there might be a reduction in the decibel level when 2 compressors were running and when 1 compressor was running. But there was a lot of confusion about trying to simulate certainly the exact tone, and so one could argue that those numbers perhaps aren't what they should
May not be right.
They would argue that they are, but that's not an argument that we need to get into.
I guess the other part to my question is, when I heard what it would sound like with baffles, I really wasn't persuaded one way or the other because I couldn't tell. The sound engineer said that actually it would be most effective with the tonal noise, which is the one that seems to bother people the most. One possibility that I just want to put out there is of us listening to that actual solution on a similar piece of equipment. If something like that could be done somewhere close, somewhere reasonably, because he mentioned that they had a similar installation somewhere in the area. And
Yeah,
maybe doing that simultaneously, asking for information from another company, but also listening to see if that might be an effective.
That's certainly an option for both myself and the board to contemplate. But if we enlist the ideas of other experts and they feel that baffling might not be the way to go, then I'm not sure we would want to spend the time doing that. I think that the first step would be to allow me to pursue some contacts with, at least start with this company, and not waste time, though. I'm not going to drag on this. because I would agree, it would be nice to try and get something done, before next summer comes around, so that we don't have 4 summers of the level of disruption.
And do you
I
expect?
mean, this is a seasonal disruption. I mean, it's not a year-round disruption, but it's a seasonal disruption when people are outside, and so that makes it extra disruptive.
Do we expect there's a cost associated with getting a recommendation from this company?
Initial contact, probably not, but once you begin to utilize their expertise and service, I doubt if they're going to do it without a cost involved.
So just to get a proposal from them of what they think would solve the problem will probably involve some cost?
I would come back to the board and keep them appraised of what they would perceive a cost to be once they entered into a further analysis for us.
And I was really pleased to see your recommendation that we seek some additional advice. I left the test last week unconvinced that the baffle was the solution, and feeling of a similar nature that we need at least a second opinion. We may need a third or a fourth. We don't know yet. But I hear you saying that you'd really like to gather a lot more information before we begin to spend significant money on attempted solutions, and I support that. I'm also very pleased that we have community members here tonight and throughout the recent, last 2 or 3 years who have been, I would say, very measured in their response, despite living with a situation that is very difficult for them. And whether we term it a partnership or just keeping our ears open, I think we certainly need to at least keep our ears open and stay in communication with the community members who are affected by that. And I'm not hearing you say that we won't do that, just that perhaps the term partnership is not the best way to couch that.
Yeah, I guess I answered that the way I did in the sense that really the final decision for this rests with the Board of Education.
Right.
And it's kind of like when I'm hiring somebody, I enlist the observation support of a lot of people, but I caution them that their input is advisory, but that the final decision rests with me. But I'm very sensitive to the advice they give me. And so I guess I would approach this the same way, that I would tell the board that to be very sensitive to the observations, advice, and recommendations from whomever. But the final decision really rests with you. Hopefully it rests with you with a recommendation from me. And that's how I would approach it.
I have a sort of a 2-part question. First for Jane, based on sort of seasonal weather patterns and temperatures, when do we anticipate that the chillers are no longer going to be operational this summer/fall?
I think certainly after Labor Day. Once it starts to be pretty, I mean, this has been excessive, this heat. Once we get into September, usually,
probably late September.
yeah, then we're in the school.
Probably.
We want to keep a comfort level during the day, but it cools off at night. I don't anticipate the nighttime running or anything like that that we have done the last.
And thank you. I do assume also that in order for a firm or firms to conduct what is essentially sound analysis, they're going to have to undertake some degree of modeling, and that takes time. And in light of the fact that there, is only so much time left in the summer before we get to a lessening of the operation of the chiller, coupled by the fact that once we implement a solution, we want to make sure that it's a solution that we can live with as a board, that we think is reasonable given the cost factor,
absolutely,
given the comfort level of the local residents. I don't want to rush the analysis, and I do personally feel that having at least 2 different firms look at it would be probably helpful.
Good suggestion.
So, Eric, you're saying during November we might have some days when the temperature inside the middle school hovers around 40 degrees because we're still testing the...
I think we're pretty much to the point where we only have so much time left that
That's the point. That we
exactly
make the most of our time.
make the most of our time.
Well, is the board comfortable with what I suggested in my memo then, and I could initiate contact as early as tomorrow? No.
I'm comfortable, and what I think Eric said was
Two.
we'd try to find two,
Right.
right? And I appreciate what you're saying about being open and keeping an open ear, but I hear these folks asking for some more specific progress reports, timelines. I fully own
Well, I'm very
the decision.
comfortable in, you know, if the board's comfortable, I mean, certainly I'm obligated to share with the board, but I'm very comfortable in sharing. I don't have anything to hide in this, so I have no problem with providing the similar updates as I would provide to the board.
Right, and obviously, we need to make a decision ultimately with your input as our advisor, but I'm one who believes that the more input you have, the better decision ultimately is made, even if that input is later put to the side. I think having
No,
heard
I would agree.
make a better decision. So if I can be part of an effort to make sure that that's some structured approach, then I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So the board is comfortable with my starting tomorrow and looking for firms. Very good.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Next item under discussion is school enrollment for 2011-12, and I gave you a memo with some, oh, you're welcome. I'll wait until they go and then. Okay. You have a memo from me in your packet about school enrollment for 2011-12, and these numbers were actual as of really yesterday. I didn't update it today, but I don't think we had any change. And it shows you the number of kids that we have registered and also that we expect to return in grades K through 5. And what it points out is that if you look at the number of current staff that you have some very, very good average class sizes at each grade level, except perhaps at grade 2, where right now you appear to be about 23 and a half as an average, given the fact that you have 4.5 second grade teachers. And 23.5 is an average level that you've had before at some grade levels. And it's also been an average where you've taken action to reduce that level. And I bring this before you tonight because I think it's important that the board take action one way or another relative to this class size. I think you had an experience last year where it was a little later in the year when you made a reduction by expanding staff, and you probably had an experience which wasn't all that pleasant because I've had a similar experience in the past. And so one of the things I wanted to do tonight was to bring this before the board and encourage the board to make a decision to either reduce class size by expanding one second grade position or to not, but not perhaps to revisit this in August or September when it becomes very, very difficult to change class size. And I think second grade appears to be really the only grade level at which you have a potential size issue. And again, this is not what you currently have, an issue that is out of bounds. It's maybe on the edge of what the comfort level is for some people, and it's different in every district. But 23, 24 in Lake Bluff is probably right on the edge. And so my recommendation is to make a decision tonight, and I guess if you would be looking for a recommendation to add or not add, I would be to add.
So Ben, could you give us a little more background? Okay, we recognize there's a teacher involved, an additional teacher, but what about the whole logistics of classrooms, availability?
Good question. And I did go over to the school today, and we do have an empty classroom, so to speak, because we did downsize. It was, to my understanding, 1/3 grade. So we do have an open room. I think the challenge for Shelley would be to try and make sure that the proximity of the grade level is maximized. We weren't aware that there was an empty room, and so one of the things we were strategizing this afternoon was, well, would we have to put perhaps one of the Spanish teachers on a cart? Would we have to put one of the music teachers on a cart? But then we became aware of this empty room. So I don't know if we would necessarily use that room, but that will be a leadership issue for Shelley. But I don't think space availability would be something that you'd have to worry about. Similarly, with materials and furniture and that sort of thing, that's probably not an issue, and if you decide tonight, we could make sure we'd have everything in place. You know, we do have a strong pool of candidates out there, and you know, typically, this is the time of year where districts make final decisions, and so you have a lot of people that are good, strong candidates that would probably apply here, and so I don't think that would be an issue.
A couple of questions. The numbers that we have in front of us are based on what? I heard you say a couple of things. Actual enrollment plus expected returns?
Yes.
Okay, and so...
But there's only like 3 of those expected returns, okay?
So actual, this is almost
actual
entirely
registered is
actual.
103. At least that's how it was reported to me, with 3 expected return.
And expected return, they were enrolled as of at the end
Right.
of last year, and you
They
expect
just
that they'll
haven't
be back?
registered. For
Is that-
whatever reason, they're on vacation or something.
And is our experience consistent with the notion that we wouldn't get additional late registrations?
You may get some additional late registrations.
Move-ins and that kind of thing?
Absolutely, you may.
What is our experience as of July? Do we expect move-ins yet to register in August, September, August?
Most districts do, but, you know, this is the only grade level where if you even have that, then you probably really do need to expand. But the other grade levels, you have such a large cushion
Yes.
that even with move-ins, I don't see that being.
No doubt about it, but just in trying to determine what to do about second grade, right? That seems to me an issue where 1 or 2 kids could really tip us one way or the other. That's why I'm trying to get as
Well,
specific
I can tell you, we a few days ago, were at 104, and we have climbed to 106.
By registrations or by
Yes.
expected returns? So those 3 expected returns are just sitting there.
Just sitting there, but everybody has told me that they're certainties to attend.
Okay, all right, so we climbed to 106
6.
with 2 additional registrations, is what you're saying. We would expect generally to continue to get them through August? That's what I'm trying to assess.
Yes.
James?
Yes.
In terms of the trend over the last several years, do we get a couple of additional students after the end of July?
And Jane, you're saying yes.
And I don't work with registration much, you know, unless I go out and ask, because it doesn't fall under my little world. But we do get, you know, a good deal of late registrants. I mean, last year, it was a revolving door to come in and register within days before school starts, so.
So that's what pushes me to a decision to hire, is this looks like marginally acceptable, and if our experience is that we will push it to 107, 108, 109, then we get beyond marginally acceptable pretty quickly.
Exactly, and I think one of the reasons why I'm bringing it tonight is that you really have to decide, and if you're going to wait till August to see, okay, what have I brought in, or September, then you get into a real challenge when you have to move kids. Because what will happen shortly is that we will notify parents who their teacher is, who their child's teacher is. And once you do that, and then you try and move them, you have a real issue on your hands.
What struck me was that, you know, we looked at class size history for the second grade over the last 5 years, and this is somewhat out of the norm, I would say. Hitting 23 and a half on average is higher than what we've seen.
Yeah.
In the elementary school.
In the elementary school in second grade.
In the lower grades, because we're still in the lower grades at this point,
Right.
not the 3rd, 4th, 5th, right?
And so to be consistent with the norm, which, you know, and I haven't calculated this out other than simply looking at the individual class sizes within that grade over the last 5 years, you know, it would stand to reason that we need to hire
And I think
additional teacher.
one of the things that I would like to do this year is really analyze your entire amount of staff, because you know your enrollment is somewhat going down, and So if that's the case and you're adding staff, then some people might say, well, how can that be? So I think it begs to look at really your overall staffing pattern to make sure that you have the right staff and the right number of staff for the number of kids you have.
I agree with that. I would just say that the time to do that is in a planful manner,
Oh,
as you suggested, rather
no,
than-
I'm not doing it.
No, I know. I'm making that point maybe to the rest of the board. If we could tomorrow, come up with a great plan to reallocate, then that might be one thing, right? But we need to do that in a planful manner.
Absolutely.
And we have a short-term concern that seems to me that's going to pretty likely turn to 23.5 and to 24 and in the next month.
It very well could.
Which is significantly above what we've staffed at that grade level in years past.
For two, yeah. If it was third, fourth, or fifth, then we'd be having a different discussion, I think.
I would.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of things that could drive a different discussion, one being that our economic situation. A lot of school districts are facing larger class sizes because they can't afford to hire teachers, period, or
Right.
keep the ones they had. So we have the luxury of having this discussion, which is that we shouldn't lose sight of, okay?
That's right.
That's important. But I do agree with Ben in the sense that the sooner we make a decision, the more we can put in place the plans that are appropriate so that at the beginning of the school year, we are prepared to start with.
Yeah, and it makes it easier on us to do it. And easier for the students and the parents.
I had a question too, because I don't remember the exact numbers, but it seems like we talked about this last year, and there were a large number of very late registering first grade students. I'm sorry?
That created the problem we have now in second grade.
Okay, but I'm curious if something like that could happen again, because I think we were seeing not just move-ins, but then suddenly kids that were moving from private schools who typically wouldn't have done. And I guess I'm wondering what would happen if you start to see something like that. I assume that the district can react if we need to. If we have another 8 or 9 kids register, what would happen, or how would you handle that?
Well, if you had 8 or 9, you could probably handle it. If you had 17, you might have the same issue with first grade. But, are you going to have 17 kids in first grade register between now and the opening of school? Highly unlikely. And in districts, one year versus another, it's a different grade level. Some years it's third grade that gets the bump. Some years it's first grade that gets the bump.
But what we're saying now, we know something today, so we can take action.
Absolutely.
There is a possibility anything could be different in a month or two. And then we scramble, we do the right thing at that point in time. But I guess what all Ben's asking for us to do today is give him the opportunity, he and Shelley, to do something that he can plan for and plan accordingly. And then if the circumstances do change and come September, we have more students than we anticipated, they're going to have to come back with another plan, which is going to be more of a scramble plan, but we recognize that.
But I don't think that'll be the case, because you've got real good cushion.
I know you have cushion, you said that, so I'm not so worried about it. I just want to make sure we, since we do have the opportunity, we have good information today, let's make the right decision, move on, and deal with what the consequences or whatever the future might bring us in September. But I agree with you. I think we have good cushion. If it proves that we have 17 additional students in one grade, we'll have to deal with it.
We have good cushion everywhere but in second grade.
That's right.
We have no cushion at all, which is to my point, why we need to hire,
That's the
right?
premise, right? We think it's getting to a point where it's getting too high.
With essentially, it's a hard question at 23.5, but if we've seen August registrations, I think it gets to be a simpler question because we have no cushion beyond where we are right now for second grade. So for me, I think making a decision today makes sense to hire. What I want to understand is that we have a plan to look at resource allocation next year, as you point out.
And I'm more comfortable in being proactive as opposed to reactive. And it isn't that we've had parents and staff clamoring that we have an issue here. In fact, nobody has come to me, really. I just wanted to analyze and see what we had, and I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the last item under discussion, which is board meeting schedule for 2011-12. You have a short memo in your packet from me. We do have 2 dates, November 1 and March 6th, in which the use of the Village Hall meeting room is not available. So we need to simply either change the dates or the location. I guess my recommendation, I don't know if I have a recommendation as to which one to do.
I think the idea is, what do we, if we're going to publicly televise it, I think we have to have a location where we can do that. So if we have to change the date to do that, that's what we have to do.
This is committee of the whole,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, but when we get to that point, if we're at that point where we might be televising, I know we haven't made that decision, but if we were, I think that's would cause us to change the date.
Yeah, I think too, I don't even know that we were considering that portion of it, but in terms of the committee of the whole meetings, I think we're trying to set a schedule where they are 2 weeks before this meeting, so my recommendation would be that we not change the date. Liz did check for us today to see if perhaps the public safety building conference room was available. It's close, it's large, it is not available. So I think that leaves probably the district office conference room. We'll just need to make sure that people know that that's where the meeting is occurring, and for those 2 meetings, that's where it'll be.
Or, given the size, perhaps one of the schools?
Well, that's, yeah, you could have it at one of the schools.
Conference room just doesn't leave much space for visitors at all.
That's a good suggestion.
Middle school library?
Middle school library or elementary school lunchroom, either one would be.
Good suggestion.
Keeping the same date makes sense.
Yes.
As long as we have some adult chairs.
Not in a classroom with miniature chairs,
I
please.
have sat in the middle school lunchroom in an adult chair, and it's comfortable.
So you want
You
to,
sat next to me at the dinner, Terry.
you want to move it to the middle school lunchroom?
Sounds good.
Okay.
It was middle school library or elementary school lunchroom.
School lunchroom.
Middle school lunchroom is not.
Middle school library.
There we go.
Middle school library.
We got it.
Is that better? I'm not familiar with either. Huh?
And meetings have been there before.
No, it's November 1 and March 6th.
Middle school library?
Okay, that would conclude discussion. We move on to action. And we have the personnel recommendations. So,
Okay, could I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approves the personnel recommendations as per the attachment.
Second.
Any discussion on those? Anything on those, Ben?
no,
Okay,
no.
great.
So, Ben, can you just give us an update? Where do we stand in hiring open positions?
Yes. We technically have a PE vacancy at the middle school because the board hasn't taken action to fill that position. I will tell you that Nate and I talked about this position today. He did finish his interviews. We did some reference checking, and so we will be bringing that position to be filled to you next time. So technically, I should say technically he has an opening, but he really doesn't. So unless somebody changes their employment status between now and the beginning of school. At the elementary school, we have an enrichment position vacancy. We have a 5th grade vacancy. If you take action on the 2nd grade position, we'll have a 2nd grade expansion vacancy. And then we found out today that we're going to have a PE vacancy. I'm not sure whether we did get the letter, did we? So we do have a PE vacancy. So those currently are the only vacancies in the district. So,
But other than the PE, the recent PE, as well as the 2nd grade, which we haven't voted on, everything else is in progress. I mean,
yes, yes, and interviews are set up next week for those positions. Yes.
Any other questions or discussion?
What enrichment program vacancy do we have? What?
It's the reading position.
Okay. Buffy Stoffer went.
She's on sabbatical, is that correct, Shelley, this year?
Sounds sabbatical. And we, I take it, found candidates that we're excited about for math. The buzz around town has been that the math teacher candidates were really terrific. Nate and so we were able to fill those positions?
Yes. The last position left to fill at the middle school was, as Dr. Martindale mentioned, the PE. Yeah, so we've got great candidates for all of our positions. I'm very excited.
Anything else?
No, not on that end.
Al, can we have a roll call?
Eric Wagner,
Yes.
Leanne Charlo,
Yes.
Susan Ryder,
Yes.
Mary Jane Brady,
Yes.
Terry Carney,
Yes.
Al Whitehouse, yes.
Okay, the second action item was the middle school chiller, and I don't think there's a need to have further discussion about that or to take action on the recommendation listed there, which was to install baffling, or for the administration to get cost information for installation of baffling equipment. So we can move beyond that to the recommended action to employ a second grade expansion position.
I move that the Board of Education directs the administration to employ an additional second grade teacher as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Further? Al, can we have a roll call?
Terry Carney?
Yes.
Mary Jane Brady?
Yes?
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Eric Wagner?
Yes.
Al Pfeifhaus?
Okay, moving on to the next item is the job description language for intervention specialists, which is in your packet.
I move that the Board of Education approves the language in the job description for the intervention specialist position as per the attachment. Any discussion on that?
This is a position that came to us a couple board meetings ago, I believe, so I think we've gone through.
We've seen, yeah, we've seen the presentation on that. So, any other questions? Al, can we have a roll call?
Al Pfeifhaus? Yes. Eric Wagner?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mary Jane Brady?
Yes?
Terry Carney?
Yes.
Next item is the job description language for technology specialist.
Could we have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the language in the job description for the technology specialist position as per the attachment.
Second.
Discussion on that?
I guess the question is not so much the description, but where are we relative to hiring that position?
We interviewed today.
And again, this is a position that was brought to us at a previous board meeting.
That's correct.
Replacement.
Well, and it's replacing a position that we did have before in a little bit different way.
Scaled back.
It's a reconfiguration.
What do you mean by scaled back, Jane?
Well, we don't need a full-blown network administrator, the previous position that we had. We just need somebody in the school to help
So
staff and students with day-to-day issues primarily.
So I take it that the salary range is adjusted down? for
Absolutely,
this position?
absolutely.
To me, it feels like kind of a cross between a network administrator and a hardware help desk, you know, a little bit of both. So,
And we have candidates willing to accept the position within the range that we're,
We interviewed 4 today, and we have 2 very exceptional candidates.
And they know the salary, so they know their.
Absolutely.
So, no debate on that.
Any other? Al, we have roll call?
yep. Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Eric Wagner?
Yes.
Al Pfeifhaus? Yes. Terry Carney?
Yes.
Mary Jane Brady?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
yes.
Almost forgot to vote.
Okay, the next item is approval of amended board meeting schedule, which just simply moves the location of those 2 meetings to the middle school library.
I move that the Board of Education approve the amended board meeting schedule for 2011-12 as presented as we just discussed.
Second? Any discussion on that? Do we need just a voice vote on that?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? There being none? Okay.
Okay, next item is any possible action as a result of closed session. There is none. Takes us down to the consent agenda, and you have 8 items there. You have the regular meeting minutes for June 30th, 2011, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes, June 23rd, 2011, special meeting minutes, July 11, 2011, special meeting minutes, July 20th, 2011, destruction of closed session tapes for December 15, 2009, December 28, 2009, bills payable for July 2011, the treasurer's report, and activity reports.
I move to approve the following items on the consent agenda as just described by our superintendent.
Second.
Any discussion? Al, we have roll call?
Eric Wagner?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo,
Yes.
Susan Ryder,
Yes.
Al Pfeifhaus, yes. Terry Carney,
Yes?
Mary Jane Brady.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to new business, and I kind of combined staff tutoring and summer programs under one memo to you, and perhaps I put this on here sooner than I should have. In some of my discussions, some things were brought to my attention which caused my radar to go up a little bit, and the more I talked, the more I realized that maybe there aren't some issues here. But one of the things that is a practice here, perhaps not a pervasive practice, but we do have teachers that tutor students and receive compensation for that. I don't think we have any instances where teachers are tutoring students who are currently in their classroom. And then we also have a summer program that is a 10-week summer program, I think an 8 to 10-week summer program conducted by a staff member in the school, in the elementary school. And there's not always consistent supervision. And so one of the things I get concerned about is both the liability of the individuals and the liability of the board in situations like that. And so one of the things that I would like to do is perhaps take a look at some policy development that would need to be created to perhaps allow the board to be protected a little bit more, or the staff members to be protected a little bit more. I didn't put this on here to indicate to you that you have this huge problem. But one of the jobs I look at when I come into districts is, if I flip over a rock and I find something that doesn't look quite right, I like to investigate it a little more. And so I like to bring it to your attention sooner rather than later. And perhaps I was a little bit premature by putting it on the agenda, because as soon as you put something on the agenda, everybody goes, oh my God, why is that on there, and what kind of problem do you have? So you really don't have a problem. You just have some things going on that I would like to investigate further. And if there needs to be a policy that's adopted by the board, that would be what I would suggest. So
I think it's a great idea.
that's why it's on there.
Ben, you mentioned compensation. Is that compensation going through our business office, or is that directly student to
Well,
teacher?
it is for the summer program. I doubt if it is for the tutoring of students. Okay.
I wasn't clear on the difference there.
Well, you have teachers that provide some supplemental tutoring of students, and I don't know how pervasive it is. I mean, it just, it was mentioned to me on a couple of occasions, and that's done during the school year, and it may be done after school, and I've been told it's done after school on school property. But I don't think it's to the point where Ms. Jones, who teaches third grade, is tutoring her third grade students for a fee provided by parents. I don't think we have that. I say I don't think. I would hope not, because that's not something you should do. But then we have the summer program, which is operated by a staff member at the elementary building. And that does flow through the district. That modification was made a couple of years ago. Apparently, originally, it wasn't that way. It was just direct payment to that staff member from the parents. But now a modification has been made, and so it does flow through the district. But I think there's some tweaking that can be done on that. I did have an opportunity to meet with that staff member this afternoon for about 20 minutes just to get some information, and so I think we need to make some adjustments on that also.
So Ben, you're not saying we need to, you're not recommending anything specific?
No,
right now.
no.
Take a look and see where we might need to more carefully define the lines of responsibility and accountability and liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, for one, am very gratified that you're actually looking at, what we've really, as a district, been used to. Tradition isn't necessarily as tight as it needs to be in order to protect the district. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing to, as you say, look under all the rocks and see how business practices are being handled here in the district to make sure that we're doing things right as well as we can.
Yeah, and I think this is an example of where I want to be proactive in terms of helping, but perhaps I was a bit reactive by putting it on the agenda so soon. That's why I don't like to be reactive. So, any questions about that? And we'll bring this back to you, maybe not next month, but And it may result in, or maybe in September, but it may result in having a policy created. I couldn't find anything in your existing board policy that speaks to this, but that's not uncommon either.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, old business, superintendent search. You did direct me in a prior discussion to make contact to two search firms to come and make presentation before the board, and I did that. And the memo I have in your packet speaks to the two firms. What the board would need to do is set a special meeting date. You know, you could do it at a regular meeting date, but it works better sometimes if it's at a special meeting date where that's the only thing you have to focus on. And I think some of you have been through this before, so you know how it works. They come and they make a presentation, and you deliberate, and you make a selection, and you get started. I think the sooner you start this process, the better. You know, some districts have already started the process, but if you delay it, you end up losing your competitive edge, so to speak.
So, Ben, when you say the sooner we start, the better, do you mean start in August with these interviews?
I would suggest in August, yes, to set a special date, and it doesn't have to be a meeting that lasts more than, you know, a couple of hours. You know, maybe 45 or 30 to 45 minutes for each firm, and half hour to 40 minutes for the board to discuss, and then select, and then move on.
Right. Makes sense.
So,
Okay. Is that, do we set a date now, or shall we try to organize that over this next week, or?
whatever your pleasure is. You could set it now. You could have discussion over the next week. I know Mark isn't here, so.
Yeah, maybe try to look at our calendars and try to get this set.
Because it's really important to have the entire board present.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I'm not at all sure of his schedule. I don't know.
Vacations, I think, to have everybody present, but at least,
I think
at least 5 or
we
6.
should throw out possible dates and see what happens, right? You're right, I don't think we're gonna get everybody.
I don't think so, not in August.
Why not, yeah. So,
You want a couple dates? You want to give me a couple dates?
I'll tell you when not to.
Well, and Ben, are they pretty wide open? Did they both suggest that we could have a fairly wide?
I didn't get any dates that they wouldn't be available, but I think we start from where the board has availability, and then I go to them, and if there's a conflict, then we'll have to.
And we're assuming this will be an evening meeting, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
At 6, is that whatever you would agree to?
Do a 6 o'clock and a 7 o'clock, and then
Yeah.
spend a little time together?
Yep.
I don't think we need an hour.
We can probably reserve
45 minutes and 45 minutes?
6 to 8 for the entire meeting.
Yeah, max. 6 to 8 for the whole meeting.
Okay.
45, 45, and 30. We've been through this, Mary Jane.
Right.
Those presentations won't take too long.
That is true.
No.
Oh, they'll take as long as we give them.
That's why it's gonna go 30, 30, 30.
I appreciate that.
So what are a couple dates?
Dates I can't make are 11th and 12th for sure. I'm out of town.
What about the 16th as a possibility?
I'm not free on the 16th.
I think, too, maybe the weekends get pretty busy. It would seem we may need a weeknight.
Isn't August 16th a
Oh, wait, I'm
Tuesday?
looking at July.
Tuesday.
Oh, July 16th is a weekend.
How much time do you have available that day? 2012 or?
So are you out that whole week, Eric?
No, I'm here.
So like the 17th might work for you?
Yeah.
So far, everything you've mentioned is okay with me.
17th? Going once, going twice?
Do it earlier if we want to get into early August, just to get it going.
The 18th would work for me, too.
10th?
10th, I'm out of town. The whole week.
17th, 18th both work for me.
Should we try for that?
What's next week? Nobody have any time next week?
I'm okay next week.
Second, third, fourth? I mean, I guess there's Lake Forest Day on the Wednesday there, but.
What about the 4th?
I don't know when Mark gets home. I think that if we did it more the week of the 17th, 18th, I think he's going to be home by then. So it might be good if we could try to hold it off a little bit. 17th and 18th work for people?
Yep, so far,
All right, why don't we try that, and I'll see what we can
And
come
maybe
up
we
with.
could pop him an email also and see, he's been answering emails
Yes, he has.
back and forth a little bit.
And
so-
he and I also talked the other day
Okay, so maybe we could,
by phone.
we
so
would know.
It's tricky, but the phone worked for the brief period of time that we talked, so.
Good.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next item under old business, mural. I'll defer to Jane to bring this before you for some brief discussion.
You had previously directed me to talk with another firm. We did talk with them, and they created a mock-up. I believe I emailed the pictures. Okay, good, because I brought them just in case you wanted. And basically, they showed us what it would look like in 2 different locations of the school. So I've done what I was directed to do, so now we're looking for direction on what you want to do now, if anything.
They give you any cost estimate for
Yes, same.
those locations?
About 17,000.
17,000.
To install, is that?
To do whatever little work they need to do to the canvas, install it.
Glass,
The-
UV
Oh, I
protective
see.
type of stuff.
The previous quote we got, which was from Chicago Conservation, had been about 14.
So it's consistent,
Well,
but
arm twisting.
But Jane, the condition that the mural's in right now, it's safe, and if we,
Well, they have it right now.
but I mean, it's in a spot that it's safe, and if we didn't do anything with it for, I mean, the way it's being held and the way it's packaged and all,
it was rolled up and
so if we
Chicago
didn't,
Conservation actually packed it.
if we didn't do anything right away, it's still in a position that,
We'll need to talk to this firm, we'll probably get it back, or if, I don't know if they can store it for us indefinitely. We'll make arrangements to store it if that's what we're going to do. That's, I guess, what I should say.
it struck me from the pictures that neither of the places looked particularly good.
Well,
Agreed.
I sent a note to Jane and asked, why did it have to be in the elementary school?
Well, that was been the discussion that we've had over time. So it doesn't have to go to the elementary school.
Is there
And
room
quite-
in the middle school?
The problem is really needs about 15 feet of vertical wall space.
So there's
And
not
it's
really
hard
room
to
in the middle
loc-
school
yeah.
either. Not that Nate doesn't want it. Yeah.
Unless you put it behind
Put a banner.
basketball proof.
So all kidding aside, is the library a possibility, or not to be too glib, but that wall over there looks good. I don't want to be too flippant, but
I wonder what the cost would be to put it in storage?
Well, we had a quote, Chicago Conservation was going to store it for us. It was next to nothing. I don't remember exactly, but it seemed like it was going to be $50 a month or something like that. I mean, we can work on that. If the board's pleasure is to table this for now, and we need to find storage until such time that we want to find a better location, we'll work on that. We'll make arrangements to do so.
Sure, prefer that over spending 14 or 17,000 right now to hang the mural in a location that apparently some of us don't feel is ideal.
It's also, that wall, once we unloaded bookshelves, there's an intake vent there, so it would have to be pulled out at least 6 inches from the wall for install.
it's not a natural look in the library in either place.
The cardboard mock-up was a great idea, actually, because it illustrates just how large this mural is.
it didn't look like it belonged there at all.
Have we ever asked if the VLEAT is interested in it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That seems like something we might want to check out. It seems like the community feels strongly about the mural, and so this might be something where we get further input from where people would like to see it placed. Maybe? I don't know.
It's like the elementary school surround around the door.
Pardon?
Who's going to pay for it? I'm sure there's a lot of ideas about where it could go.
Right.
But the question is, we face as a board, is this where we spend our money?
Well,
And-
and maybe I don't know, maybe manage as fundraiser. I don't.
I don't either, but I think that the question is that we should, at hand is whether or not we spend any money, then we can decide if it's relevant to debate where it goes.
Yeah, I personally would prefer to see it, if it was going to be installed somewhere, I'd prefer to see that happen with, private donations, or if the community feels strongly wants to raise money for it. I have a lot of trouble thinking about spending district funds to the tune of, $14,000 or $17,000 to put that up.
I do too, but I do think that there's enough people who care about it that maybe their private kind of initiative could be.
Raise the funds.
Well, again, the frontis is still out there too. We still have that to deal with.
Which sort of brings me to I guess if we're going to talk about the larger historical and other kind of planning considerations that involve the public, we now have, an empty space where East was, and we are dealing right now with some final grading over there, leveling.
They're just about finished.
And obviously, in the short term, we're looking at the chiller issue, which is occupying some of our attention in that area. But eventually, we did indicate to the members of the public that we were going to start some sort of deliberative process to engage the public, to engage the district on how to use that space. Because it's not going to remain dirt. It's going to be, something's going to be there. We have to figure out what it is, and we have to go through that dialogue with the community who are expecting it. So I guess the question is, when do we begin that process? Do we wait until after we've resolved the chiller issue? Obviously, there's not a lot that we can do right now until we resolve some of these unresolved issues.
I thought we agreed that it would just remain a green space. I didn't know we were going to do anything more with it because we thought we needed that space available and underdeveloped just in case someday we need to expand or do something with the middle school. I didn't think we were going to do anything of more permanent nature or structure on that.
And I think it's a fair point to say that whatever we end up doing there, it's going to be somewhat minimalist because it is essentially a space that's in waiting for something that we might do as a district in the future. But in the short term, there are some things beyond just putting down sod that you can do to enhance the appearance of that empty space.
Or even the usability for the community as a, place to relax or,
Right. And there was discussion that the East Schools Task Force had made, quite a significant point about doing something with the space, not necessarily spending a lot of money on it. But
Well, and along the lines of what Ben was talking about in long-term plans, it really probably is a really good time to talk about a long-term plan for what we might need for facilities 10 and 20 years down the road, and perhaps incorporate all these things into that plan and that kind of a community discussion.
If I could maybe ask you to consider something specific to that space next door, which is quite large and has been seeded. I don't know if it's completely seeded, but they were getting there. Okay. We've never been able to host field hockey. We do have a team that travels to the high school, and the high school has been gracious enough to allow us to use their field for our home games. And the Park District's been gracious enough to allow us to use their field across the street at Artesian for our soccer games. It's a possibility that we could host some of those things if that space were to be allowed to be used for such a thing. We're talking about, a couple weeks out of the year for no more than 2 hours after school.
That makes sense, right? We have the foreseeable future to use it, and that seems low cost.
Yes,
right?
We have the equipment. It's just a matter of carrying it across the street. I would have to look into, I'm sorry, I spoke prematurely. I would have to look into who owns those goals that we use, whether that's Park District or whether that's...
And we might want a few benches or something like that for parents.
But I think it comes down to the board setting the parameters on how we approach this, whether it's a financial parameter or liability issues, whatever it is, but we have to have parameters. And then we can debate how we use it. But if we don't set parameters, we're going to be all over the board with a lot of great ideas, but some of which we just can't do. So I think if we can sit down and set certain parameters about what we're willing to invest district funds to do, where our liability sits and all that kind of stuff, and we have clear understanding, then I think we can talk more articulately and intelligently about what to do with that space. That's the way I look at it, but
And I think
I don't want a free-for-all, that's for sure.
Well, no, I think that's also something that the board, when we did talk about it in the past, we did articulate the need to frame the discussion to the extent that we were going to have discussion with the public. This is something that needs to have some boundaries.
Right, I
And
agree
we
with
need
that.
to start with those boundaries through the planning process, and then ultimately,
Yep.
if we need to engage our, the larger constituency about how to use that space, you don't give them, you don't open the door to again, a free-for-all, as you said, but a series of choices based on what our district constraints are.
I mean, it's important, I think, from the liability who uses it, and we understand that. School-sponsored stuff, we know who's liable, but when you have non-schools activities on that property, I think we better understand what we're doing.
Okay.
Other discussion?
Where do we end up with a mural? Before
Well,
we
I think
jump
I'm
off.
just going to find a place and a method to store it.
Since it's
for now.
currently being stored, we don't need any further action to tell you to continue to store it,
I'll
right?
investigate storage, long-term storage.
The first person asked us where it is should be asked if they want to volunteer to lead a community initiative to raise funds to do something with it.
That in the front, yeah.
And that in the Prentice, which strikes me as we talk about.
We have a local resident that used to work for the school district that we might contact to see if she might have some interest in this area.
Okay, that makes sense, because I'm with you, Leanne. I don't think $14,000 or $17,000 we have to spend on some.
I will tell you, a few years ago, she raised $7,500 to have it restored, so. She cares about the historical aspects of the community, so I'll contact her and
This
see.
piece, I think, maybe goes in that same.
I mean, that's the money, but I think we're also hearing that the elementary school probably isn't the right.
Correct, but that's why I'm gonna contact her. She's on the fleet and.
As long as it stays in the community.
Exactly. Thanks, Jane.
And, okay, final item on our old business is Board of Education Workshop, August 30th. We have a special board meeting for a closed session board self-evaluation with Barb Tony, Illinois Association of School Boards. And I'm really excited about this. I've worked with Barb before, and I don't know if any of you have, but you'll find she's very good at what she does.
Start time that night?
I had 5:30.
I think 5:30 to get together so that, and I don't know if people want to bring something to eat or if we want to order pizza or something and be ready to go on the dot 6 o'clock.
And we just need to decide where it's going to be. I think we talked about it being at the board office, at the
How much
district
space does
office.
she need? Is that enough space for her to
Oh,
do
yeah.
her thing?
She just needed a flip chart.
She just needs a flip chart, and that room where you've had a couple of meetings would suffice just fine. I just wanted to make sure you're all in agreement with that. I don't know if any of you have worked with Barb before. She is a former school board member from West Chicago, and currently sits on the State School Finance Authority Board in Hazel Crest, besides being a consultant for the Illinois Association of School Boards.
She came to me, highly recommended by the Wilmette School Board.
Yeah, no, she's very good.
On this very point, board education.
Yeah, so, good. That would conclude all we have under old business. One of the things I do intend on doing this Thursday is sending a little board update via email. I'm going to try and do that on a regular basis. I'm going to try and have this be the first one. And I will tell you right now, one of the things that will be in there is that I discovered this week that I will be out of town on your action meeting in August. I'll be in Louisiana. So I'll include that in my board update.
Any other old business? All right. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn at 8:47.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There being none.